Verse 882. When there is a revulsion from discrimination, one is removed from death and destruction. Let him discourse on the truth of the emancipated ones, which is like a hare's hair and a multicoloured gem. So this revulsion was spoken of back in 879. It's not revulsion in the usual sense. It means a turning about in the seat of consciousness. That's how it's usually described. It means we've reached a certain stage in our spiritual practice where we're not taking our cue from the world, from the discriminations that we make in terms of our world and other people, and me in relation to these other people, to this world. We're no longer taking our cue from that. We're taking our cue from what is described here as like a multicoloured gem, in which I've described as the rainbow body. The rainbow body. We're taking our cue from realization of the wonderful nature of this ordinary awareness that is operating now. We're told that we've removed from death and destruction. In the series of videos that I did on the Yoga Vasishtha, many of the stories were set in scenes of tremendous death and destruction. This is the opportunity to practice. Probably isn't a healthy thing, but in fact it isn't a healthy thing to consider how you would be when you meet your end. Perhaps it's going to be a violent end. Maybe you're a hostage, or you're being tortured, or something along these lines. Or perhaps you've just been diagnosed with something malignant and you've only got so much time to live. The thing is, you don't know how you're going to be. You cannot actually process this information. I'm not sure I would handle it particularly well. In fact, I think a lot of the response is going to be from your body. It's your body that's not going to handle it very well. But we do have access to these teachings, and no matter what I'd be experiencing, if I turn to these verses or similar teachings, tune in to where these videos are coming from, I will find relief. That for me is one of the greatest things that come from these teachings. It's a relief. All concerns are put into perspective, and in fact they disappear. The point is, we practice no matter what the situation. There is no excuse not to practice. There are times we don't practice because we've got to get on with our ordinary business. Your attention has to deal with this, deal with that. But what I mean is, there's no excuse for getting caught up in some kind of drama and forgetting these teachings. Just the opposite. The greater the drama, the more reason there is to step back from it and to practice. So, faced with death and destruction, even if I get momentarily addled and distraught, as long as I can pick up one of these verses or remember them or tune into a video, then there's help. So when this happens, let him discourse on the truth of the emancipated ones. And as was mentioned in the previous verse, there's no choice but to do this. I have no choice but to do these videos, even though they don't seem to get much attention. I have to do it anyway. And it's not, I don't mean to say it's against my will or anything. When I say there's no choice, it means that, it usually means that you're under some sort of constraint. Just the opposite. Just the opposite. All element of choice has been removed. And if I've got any reason for having been put on this planet, it's to do this. And it's wonderful to find this. It's wonderful to find something which I have no equivocation about. I'll say a little bit more about all that as we come to the end. But I'd just like to say something about this hare's hare. The actual text is, well, it says, "Let him discourse on the truth of the emancipated ones, which is like a hare's horns and a multicoloured gem." But the translator says that the original is actually the hare's hare, which is what I read, and which was what I'll put in the online text. The translator, Professor Suzuki, says, "The text has hare's hare, which in this connection yields no sense. The truth of emptiness may be in a manner compared to a hare's horns and not to its hare." Well, the usual expression is hare's horns. But this is how our normal erroneous belief is usually illustrated. We believe in an external world. Believing in an external world, it makes as much sense as believing in a hare's horns. So the hare's horns normally applies to ignorance. And I think what we've got here at the end of the summary is a hare's hare, because that is what actually is. When we come to realization, we see what actually is. We no longer see the mirage. We no longer see the hare's horns. We see the hare's hare, or the hare's fur. So we've woken up to the simple fact of how things really are, and are no longer operating in the reality, the imagined reality of the hare's horns. So I would stick with the original here, which is the hare's hare. So we've got a couple more verses to do before we get to the end, and I think I'll leave them till the next video.